What if I told you there's a man who walks through chaos as calmly as most people walk through a quiet park? While others panic, he plans. While others complain, he builds. His name is Daniel, and his secret isn't luck, wealth, or talent. It's his mind. Most people don't realize that the greatest battles in life aren't fought in the world, they're fought inside our own heads. Daniel learned that truth the hard way. A few years ago, Daniel was a regular man, broke, angry, and afraid. He jumped from one job to another, blaming the world for his failures. Every small setback felt like proof that life was unfair. He wanted success, but his mind was his own worst enemy. Then one day, something changed. He met an old mentor named Mr. Whitmore, a quiet man who spoke with calm authority. "Your mind," Mr. Whitmore said, "is either your greatest servant or your worst master. Right now, it's your master, and it's breaking you." Daniel frowned. "So how do I fix that?" Mr. Whitmore smiled faintly. "You train it. Like a warrior." That was the beginning of Daniel's transformation, the day he began forging an unshakable mind. 1. Read every day, feed the warrior within. Mr. Whitmore's first lesson was simple but powerful. "Read," he said. "Every single day. No excuses." Daniel laughed. "Books? I thought success came from action." "Action without understanding," Mr. Whitmore replied, "is like swinging a sword in the dark. You'll hit something, but probably not what you want." So Daniel began reading. At first, it felt pointless. 15 minutes each morning, sitting at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and an old book that smelled like dust. But slowly, something began to happen. His thoughts became clearer. His vocabulary sharper. His ideas deeper. While his friends wasted hours scrolling through meaningless distractions, Daniel was feeding his mind new weapons, ideas, principles, strategies. He read about great thinkers, inventors, philosophers, men like Benjamin Franklin, who used candles to study when others slept, and Napoleon Hill himself, who spent decades studying what made people rich in spirit and wealth. Daniel realized something powerful. Reading wasn't about collecting words, it was about collecting power. Each page added a brick to the fortress of his mind. Every new idea made him stronger. And when life threw him challenges, his thoughts no longer collapsed under pressure. He had built a foundation. 2. Write every night. Tame the storm inside. The second lesson came a few weeks later. Mr. Whitmore handed Daniel a small leather notebook. "From tonight onward," he said, "you write." "About what?" Daniel asked. "Everything. Your fears, your failures, your thoughts, your dreams. Don't keep chaos in your head. Put it on paper where you can see it." Daniel thought it was silly. But he did it anyway. The first pages were messy, complaints, worries, random thoughts. But as days passed, writing became a mirror. He started seeing patterns in his behavior. He noticed where he kept making the same mistakes. Something magical happened. When his thoughts touched paper, they lost power over him. Problems that once felt overwhelming became solvable. He learned to organize his mind, to separate emotion from truth. His writing became his therapy, his teacher, and his map forward. Months later, when he reread his first entries, Daniel almost laughed. "I don't even know this man," he whispered. He was lost. The man he had become, calm, clear-headed, confident, was someone new. Writing had tamed the wildness of his thoughts and replaced confusion with clarity. 3. Face fear, the fire that forges strength. But Mr. Whitmore's third lesson was the hardest. "Daniel," he said one cold morning, "fear is the enemy of the mind. Until you face it, you'll never be free." Daniel looked away. He knew his fears too well: fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of looking foolish. He had built his whole life around avoiding them. "That's the problem," Mr. Whitmore said. "You think fear is a stop sign. It's not. It's a green light. It means go there. That's where your growth is waiting." So Daniel began challenging himself. He spoke in meetings instead of staying quiet. He started a small business he dreamed about for years. He made phone calls he used to avoid. Each time he faced fear, it lost a little more control over him. He learned that fear is like a shadow. It looks big only when the light of courage is behind you. When you step into it, it fades. And something incredible happened. His confidence grew. He stopped doubting himself. He no longer needed others' approval to feel strong. The awakening months turned into a year. Daniel's friends started noticing the change. He walked differently. He spoke with calm conviction. When problems appeared, he didn't panic, he analyzed. When others complained, he planned. "Man," one friend said, "nothing seems to shake you anymore." Daniel smiled. "That's because I built my strength where nobody could see, in my mind." He had learned what the Stoics and thinkers like Napoleon Hill had been teaching for generations. The strongest weapon in the world isn't a sword or a gun, it's a trained mind. Reading fed it. Writing sharpened it. Facing fear forged it. And now, Daniel understood what Mr. Whitmore meant that first day. "Your mind is either your servant or your master." Daniel had made his mind his servant, disciplined, focused, and fearless. But the journey wasn't over. Mr. Whitmore had 6 lessons in total, and Daniel had just completed the first 3. The next ones would test his patience, focus, and emotional strength even more deeply. Before they began, the old mentor said something Daniel would never forget. "Once your mind becomes your strongest weapon, the world stops being your enemy and starts being your playground." End of Part 1. The Mind of Steel. Part 2 continues. The Power of Self-Control. Would you like me to continue with Part 2 next? The Power of Self-Control. In the same story tone and about 1,000 words? Part 2. The Fire Within. Hook. Most people never realize how small their world becomes when they start avoiding fear. The moment you back away from something that scares you, your mind whispers, "See? You can't handle this." And from that moment on, your world begins to shrink. That's exactly what was happening to Daniel. Even after months of growth under Mr. Whitmore's guidance, reading daily, writing every night, there was still one enemy left unconquered: fear. Daniel had built discipline, but deep down, he still hesitated when life demanded courage. He could plan, he could think, but when it came time to act, his hands would shake. Mr. Whitmore saw it clearly. One morning, he handed Daniel a folded piece of paper. "Open it when you get home," he said. That night, Daniel unfolded the paper and read just 3 words. Face your fear. 1. Facing fear, the first battle. Daniel laughed nervously. "That's it? That's the big lesson?" But deep inside, he knew what it meant. There was something he'd avoided for years: public speaking. Even thinking about standing in front of people made his stomach twist. He'd been hiding behind silence his whole life, afraid to sound stupid, afraid to be judged. So, that week, Daniel made a decision. He would give a short talk at his local community center. Just 10 minutes. The day came. His heart pounded like a drum. His palms were wet. His voice trembled. But he didn't run. He remembered Mr. Whitmore's words. "Fear is a teacher disguised as a threat." When Daniel finished his talk, the audience clapped politely. He hadn't been perfect, not even close, but he'd done it. And in that moment, something shifted. He realized fear was a liar. It had always promised disaster, but disaster never came. Instead, he felt alive. Stronger. Clearer. From that day, Daniel made a list, his fear list. Every week, he faced something that scared him: calling an important client, asking for what he wanted, taking a risk others avoided. Each time he acted despite fear, the fear shrank. By the 10th challenge, he laughed at things that once paralyzed him. He was becoming brave, not because he felt no fear, but because he refused to obey it. 2. The Roosevelt lesson. Weeks later, Mr. Whitmore shared a story. "Do you know who Eleanor Roosevelt was?" he asked. "Of course," Daniel said. "One of the most respected women in history." "Yes," Whitmore nodded. "But do you know she was terrified of public speaking? Every speech she gave, her voice trembled. But she did it anyway, hundreds of times. She didn't wait for fear to disappear. She just acted through it. That's what made her powerful." Daniel smiled. He understood. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was movement in spite of it. "Every time you face fear," Whitmore said, "you're teaching your brain that you can handle life. And every time you run, you teach it the opposite." From that day, Daniel decided that fear would never again make his choices for him. 3. Question everything. The path to mental freedom. Months later, Daniel visited Mr. Whitmore's study. The old man's bookshelves were filled with works of science, philosophy, and history. "Tell me, Daniel," Whitmore asked, "how many of your beliefs are truly yours?" Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Whitmore said, "how many things do you believe just because someone told you to?" Daniel didn't answer. Mr. Whitmore walked to the window and said, "Most people live on borrowed thoughts. They believe what their parents, teachers, or the media tell them. They never question anything. That's why they never grow." Daniel thought about it all night. How many of his ideas were just echoes from other people? The next day, he began questioning everything: his habits, his goals, even his fears. Why do I believe this? Is it true? Or did someone just say it loudly enough? The more he questioned, the freer he felt. It was like cutting invisible strings that had controlled him his whole life. He stopped letting others define what success should look like. He stopped chasing approval. He began thinking for himself. 4. The Galileo Principle. One day, Whitmore told Daniel the story of Galileo. "For thousands of years," he said, "people believed the sun revolved around Earth. Everyone accepted it, kings, priests, scholars. It felt obvious. But Galileo questioned it. He built a telescope, looked for himself, and proved that Earth revolved around the sun. For that, they called him a heretic. They locked him away. But they couldn't lock away the truth." Mr. Whitmore turned to Daniel and said, "That's the power of independent thinking. When you dare to question the world, you see things others can't." Daniel nodded slowly. He realized why Whitmore had made him read so much, not to fill his head with facts, but to train his mind to think clearly, logically, independently. "A questioning mind," Whitmore said, "is a dangerous mind, because it cannot be controlled." From that moment, Daniel vowed never to follow the crowd blindly again. He would think, test, and decide for himself. 5. Loving mistakes, the secret of growth. But there was still one problem. Daniel hated being wrong. Whenever he made a mistake, his stomach twisted with shame. He'd replay his failures over and over, punishing himself for being imperfect. One evening, as Daniel sat frustrated over a failed business deal, Mr. Whitmore placed a hand on his shoulder. "Why are you angry?" he asked. "Because I failed," Daniel said. "I made a mistake." Whitmore chuckled softly. "Good. That means you learned something." Daniel looked confused. "Daniel," Whitmore said, "mistakes are proof that you're trying. Most people never fail because they never even start. The only real failure is refusing to learn from what went wrong." He handed Daniel a small card. On it were 3 words: fail, learn, rise. From that day, Daniel began treating his mistakes like stepping stones instead of traps. Whenever something went wrong, he wrote about it in his journal. What happened, what he learned, how he'd do better next time. He noticed something remarkable. Every mistake made him wiser, tougher, more resourceful. He stopped fearing failure because he realized failure was just progress in disguise. Every failure, he wrote in his notebook, is a message from life saying, "Not this way. Try again." The awakening. By now, Daniel's transformation was visible. He spoke with confidence. He acted decisively. He questioned the world and learned from every setback. People began coming to him for advice. They didn't know the secret, that his strength wasn't luck or talent. It was built, day by day, by facing fear, thinking independently, and embracing mistakes. Mr. Whitmore looked at him proudly. "You've built a warrior's mind," he said. "But there are still 3 lessons left. Lessons about patience, purpose, and control. When you master those, your mind will not just be strong, it will be unstoppable." Daniel smiled. "Then I'm ready, sir." "Good," Whitmore said. "Because the next lesson isn't about conquering the world. It's about conquering yourself." End of Part 2. The Fire Within. Part 3 continues. The Power of Self-Control. Would you like me to continue now with Part 3? The Power of Self-Control. Following the same storytelling style and tone, 1,000 words, American audience, simple and engaging? Part 3. The Fire Inside. Learning from failure and staying calm when others panic. Timothy sat in his small apartment, staring at the rejection letter in his trembling hands. It was the 3rd one this month. Another. No. Another reminder that success wasn't coming easy. He could feel anger building in his chest, that painful mix of frustration and self-doubt. For a moment, he wanted to throw everything away. But then he remembered Dr. Harding's words echoing in his mind. Every failure hides a lesson, Timothy. Find it before it fades. He sighed deeply and placed the letter down on the table. Maybe failure wasn't his enemy after all. Maybe it was his greatest teacher. 1. The hidden power of mistakes. Dr. Harding always said, success is failure plus lessons learned. At first, Timothy didn't understand it. Failure felt like punishment, something to avoid, not something to welcome. But as he sat there thinking about all his recent mistakes, the wrong choices, the missed chances, he realized each one had taught him something valuable. He learned which people he could trust. He learned which ideas didn't work. He learned what kind of effort real progress demanded. Each time he fell, he rose a little wiser. Most people, Dr. Harding explained, stay trapped in what he called a comfortable rut. They fear looking foolish more than they fear staying stuck. But Timothy was done being comfortable. He wanted growth, even if it hurt. He started writing down every failure in a small notebook. Under each one, he wrote the lesson learned. If I can learn faster, he told himself, I can win faster. That simple habit changed everything. 2. Fail forward, not backward. One morning, Timothy read about Thomas Edison and how he failed thousands of times before creating the light bulb. People mocked Edison, called him a fool, told him to quit. But Edison never called those attempts failures. He called them discoveries. I have not failed, Edison said. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Timothy smiled when he read that line. Suddenly, his own mistakes didn't feel so heavy. If a man could light up the world through failure, maybe Timothy could light up his own life the same way. So he began treating each setback like an experiment. When something didn't work, he analyzed it like a detective. What went wrong? What can I fix? What did I miss? He stopped blaming bad luck. He stopped feeling ashamed. And slowly, he started to see progress. Dr. Harding called this mindset failing forward. You either win or you learn, he said, but you never lose. 3. Calm in the chaos. A few weeks later, everything seemed to go wrong at once. The small business Timothy was helping fell apart overnight. Their main investor pulled out, clients panicked, and everyone started yelling at each other. Timothy felt his heartbeat rise, his palms sweat, his mind spin. Panic wanted to take over. But then, he remembered another of Harding's lessons. When everyone panics, the calm man becomes the leader. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and forced himself to think clearly. While others shouted, he listened. While others ran in circles, he started listing possible solutions. Within an hour, the chaos began to calm. People started following him. He didn't plan to lead, it just happened because he stayed calm. He realized that calmness is not weakness, it's power under control. From that day on, he practiced being calm every morning. 10 minutes of quiet breathing. 10 minutes of training his mind to pause before reacting. He called it his calmness muscle, and it grew stronger every day. 4. Thinking for yourself. Dr. Harding often said, most people are like sheep. They follow the herd without thinking. Timothy used to laugh at that. But as he looked around, he saw how true it was. People copied trends, repeated other people's opinions, and called it thinking. He decided to change that. Instead of asking others what he should do next, he started asking himself. He questioned every belief he held. Was it truly his belief, or something he borrowed from someone else? That's when he discovered something powerful. Independent thinking is the birthplace of all success. He remembered a story about a man in a small town who solved the deadly traffic problem not by spending more money, but by simply redesigning the intersection in a creative way. Everyone said it was impossible, until he proved them wrong. That man became a local hero, not because he followed the crowd, but because he dared to think differently. Timothy smiled. I want to be that kind of man, he thought. The one who creates his own path. 5. The strength of silence. The next lesson Dr. Harding gave him was simple but strange. Spend time alone. In silence. At first, Timothy found it impossible. The quiet made him uncomfortable. His thoughts felt too loud. But over time, he discovered something unexpected. Silence revealed the truth. In silence, he could hear his real voice, not the opinions of others, not the noise of social media, not the pressure of expectations. Just himself. He realized what he truly wanted and what no longer mattered. The confusion began to fade, replaced by clarity and calm purpose. The strongest minds, Harding said, are built in silence. Timothy finally understood what he meant. Silence wasn't empty, it was full of answers. 6. The turning point. Weeks later, Timothy met Dr. Harding in the park where they often talked. The old man looked at him proudly. "You've changed," he said. Timothy nodded. "I'm learning to fail forward, to stay calm, and to think for myself." Harding smiled. "Good. Most people spend their lives fearing failure, following others, and drowning in noise. You've broken all 3 chains." They watched the sunset together in silence, the good kind of silence. Timothy didn't need to prove anything anymore. He had discovered the real source of strength, his mind, trained and calm, fearless and free. That night, he wrote in his journal, "Every mistake is a message. Every quiet moment is a teacher. When I master my mind, I master my world." And with that, a new chapter of his journey began, not of avoiding failure, but embracing it as the path to greatness. Part 4. The Path of Purpose. Knowing what you truly want. The rain tapped softly against the cafe window as Timothy stirred his coffee, lost in thought. The world outside looked gray and restless, much like his own mind. He had learned how to fail forward, how to stay calm, how to think for himself, but something still felt missing. Dr. Harding, sitting across from him, noticed the distant look in his eyes. "You're searching," he said quietly. Timothy looked up. "For what?" Harding smiled. "That's the question, isn't it? Until you know exactly what you want, you'll drift like a ship without a compass." Timothy leaned back in his chair. "But how do I know what I truly want? I want to succeed, to live well, to be free. Doesn't everyone?" Harding nodded. "Yes, everyone says that. But only a few ever define what success really means to them. The rest spend their lives chasing fog." 1. The ship without a compass. Later that night, Timothy sat alone by his desk. The wind outside howled, but the louder noise came from his own mind, a storm of half-formed dreams and forgotten ambitions. He thought about how much time he had wasted doing things that didn't truly matter. Jobs he didn't love. Goals he didn't choose. Paths others had pushed him onto. Dr. Harding's voice echoed in his head. "A person without a definite purpose is like a ship without a captain. It will drift until it crashes." Timothy grabbed his notebook and wrote across the top page in bold letters, "What do I truly want from life?" At first, he couldn't answer. The question felt too big, too heavy. But slowly, ideas began to appear. He didn't just want money. He wanted freedom. He didn't just want success. He wanted meaning. He didn't just want comfort. He wanted growth. By the time he finished writing, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. 2. The power of one decision. The next morning, Timothy met Dr. Harding at their usual park bench. He showed him the page. Harding read it carefully and smiled. "This," he said, "is the start of your true life. The moment you decide what you want, the universe begins to move in your favor." Timothy frowned. "That sounds a bit magical." Harding chuckled. "It's not magic, it's focus. When your mind has a definite purpose, it starts noticing opportunities that were invisible before. You attract what you focus on." He told Timothy a story about a young steelworker named Andrew Carnegie, who began with nothing but a clear goal: to master the steel industry. Carnegie held that vision for years, working day and night with absolute purpose. Eventually, he became one of the wealthiest men in America. The secret, Harding said, was not luck. It was direction. Carnegie knew where he was going long before he arrived. Timothy realized he had spent most of his life waiting for direction instead of choosing it. 3. Burning desire, not weak wishes. Over the next few days, Timothy began turning his vague goals into definite plans. But Dr. Harding warned him. A purpose means nothing without burning desire behind it. Weak wishes create weak results. He explained how Napoleon Hill had once interviewed hundreds of successful men. Every single one of them had a definite goal and an unshakable desire to reach it. Desire, Harding said, is the fuel that keeps you going when nothing else works. To test him, Harding gave Timothy a task. Write your purpose on paper. Read it out loud every morning and every night for 30 days. Speak it as if it's already true. Timothy hesitated but did it. His written statement read, I am building a life of freedom through knowledge, discipline, and service. Every day I move closer to becoming the man I was meant to be. At first, it felt silly, like pretending. But after a week, something began to shift. Each morning he spoke those words, he felt stronger, more certain. His energy changed. His actions changed. His days became sharper and more focused. 4. The test of doubt. One evening, as he walked home, Timothy received a call from an old friend offering him a high-paying job. It sounded tempting, steady income, easy work, and quick results. But deep inside, he felt uneasy. This isn't my path, he thought. It's comfort disguised as opportunity. The old Timothy would have taken it immediately. But now, with a clear purpose, he paused. He remembered Harding's words. A definite purpose filters every choice. If it moves you closer to your goal, say yes. If not, say no, no matter how shiny it looks. He thanked his friend but politely declined. For the first time, he chose direction over distraction. That night, as he looked out the window at the quiet city lights, he smiled. Saying no had never felt so powerful. 5. Energy follows focus. Weeks passed. Timothy noticed how his new clarity changed everything. He stopped wasting time on gossip, useless entertainment, or comparing himself to others. Instead, he used his mornings to learn new skills, his afternoons to take action, and his evenings to reflect. He felt alive again. Harding called this the law of focus. What you focus on expands. When you water weeds, he said, they grow. When you water your purpose, your life grows. Timothy began surrounding himself with books, people, and ideas that aligned with his purpose. The world didn't suddenly become easier, but it became meaningful. Every small victory felt like a step in the right direction. 6. The fire of purpose. One morning, Timothy found Harding sitting quietly by the lake, feeding the birds. I finally understand, Timothy said. Purpose isn't just about goals. It's about who you become while chasing them. Harding nodded. Yes. Purpose gives your life structure. It turns your pain into progress, your failure into fuel. Without it, even success feels empty. They watched the sunrise, its golden light spreading across the water. Timothy realized that for the first time, his heart wasn't filled with confusion or fear. It was filled with certainty, the quiet confidence that he was walking his own path. He had found his compass. That night, he wrote in his journal. Definiteness of purpose is not just knowing what I want, it's committing my entire heart and mind to it. It gives meaning to every effort, and turns ordinary days into steps toward destiny. And so, the next chapter of his life began, guided by a clear, burning purpose and the unshakable belief that the man who knows where he's going can never truly be lost. Part 5. The fire that never dies. The power of persistence and faith. The sky was the color of steel when Timothy arrived at Dr. Harding's old workshop, a quiet, dusty place filled with tools, notes, and half-finished inventions. He hadn't been there before, but Harding had called it the room of lessons. On the wall hung a sign in bold, uneven letters. Winners keep going when everyone else quits. Timothy smiled. Let me guess, persistence? Harding turned from his desk, eyes shining. Exactly. Every great dream demands a price, Timothy. That price is persistence. 1. The valley of quitting. Harding led him to a large wooden table covered in old blueprints and sketches. Do you know why most people never reach their goals? He asked. Timothy thought for a moment. Because they give up? Exactly, Harding said. They quit right before the miracle happens. They stop digging just 3 feet from gold. He pulled out an old newspaper clipping about a man who had spent years mining for gold in Colorado. After endless digging and no success, the man finally gave up and sold his tools. The new owner kept digging, and struck a massive vein just 3 feet deeper. Harding looked up. That story inspired Napoleon Hill himself. He learned that failure often comes right before success. Persistence separates the weak from the strong. Timothy nodded slowly. So success isn't about luck. It's about not quitting too soon. Exactly, Harding said. Every dream will test you. It will push you, discourage you, and whisper that it's impossible. That's when persistence becomes your only weapon. 2. The long night. A few weeks later, Timothy faced his own test. He had been working hard on a new writing project, his first serious attempt to share his story and ideas. For months, he woke before sunrise and wrote until his hands cramped. But rejection letters began to pile up. Publishers said his work was too personal, too unusual, too risky. One night, frustrated and tired, Timothy slammed his notebook shut. "Maybe they're right," he muttered. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this." As if on cue, his phone rang. It was Dr. Harding. "You sound defeated," Harding said. "I am," Timothy admitted. "I've tried everything. It's not working." Harding's tone softened. "Then you're closer than ever. The moment you feel like quitting is the moment you're being tested. Most people fail not because they can't succeed, but because they give up right before the tide turns." Timothy sat in silence. Then Harding added, "Do one thing for me, just one. Promise me you'll give it one more try tomorrow. Even if it feels hopeless." Timothy sighed. "One more try." 3. The spark of faith. The next morning, Timothy woke before dawn. His mind whispered, "What's the point?" But something deeper urged him forward. He made coffee, opened his notebook, and began writing again. This time, he didn't write for publishers. He wrote from the heart. He wrote for himself. By sunrise, he had created something raw, powerful, and honest. For the first time, the words felt alive. Harding called later that day. "How did it go?" Timothy smiled faintly. "Better. I wrote something real this time." "That's faith," Harding said. "Faith is not belief in things going your way. It's belief that your effort matters, even when there's no proof yet." He paused, then added, "Napoleon Hill said faith is a state of mind you create through repetition of thought. Every time you act despite fear, you strengthen that faith muscle." Timothy realized that persistence was not just about doing, it was about believing while doing. 4. The storm before the dawn. Weeks turned into months. Timothy faced more rejection, but each no hurt a little less. His purpose gave him direction. His persistence gave him endurance. Then one day, he received an email from a small online magazine. They wanted to publish one of his essays. It wasn't fame, but it was something, proof that the tide had begun to turn. He called Harding, voice trembling with excitement. "They said yes." Harding laughed softly. "You see? The storm always breaks for those who keep walking." He added, "Persistence is more than hard work. It's a refusal to surrender when the world tells you no. Every rejection is a test of your faith." Harding told him how Henry Ford failed 5 times before creating the Model T. How Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper for lacking creativity. How Colonel Sanders was rejected over 1,000 times before anyone bought his fried chicken recipe. "They all had one thing in common," Harding said. "Faith in their idea and the persistence to prove it." 5. Building the fire. Within one evening, Harding took Timothy to a cabin in the woods. Inside was a fireplace glowing with dying embers. "Watch this," Harding said. He added a few pieces of wood and gently blew on the fire. Slowly, the flames came back to life. "This fire," he said, "is like your dream. If you stop feeding it with faith and effort, it dies. But if you keep adding fuel, one log of effort, one breath of belief, it grows until nothing can put it out." Timothy stared into the fire. He understood. Persistence was not a moment of effort. It was a way of living, a quiet decision repeated every day. 6. The reward of persistence. Months later, Timothy's writing began reaching thousands of readers. People from all over the country sent messages saying his words inspired them to keep going through their own struggles. One letter stood out, from a young man who wrote, "Your story made me try again after I almost gave up. Thank you." Timothy felt tears in his eyes. He had turned his pain into purpose. Harding smiled when Timothy told him, "Now you see what persistence creates, not just success but impact. The people who refuse to quit become the ones others look up to." As they watched the sunset, Harding added, "Remember this, faith keeps you moving when logic says stop. And persistence keeps you alive when hope runs low. Together, they can turn any dream into reality." Timothy nodded, watching the last rays fade into the horizon. He knew the path ahead would still be long, filled with setbacks and tests. But now, he carried something indestructible within him, a fire that no failure could ever extinguish. He smiled and whispered to himself, "Faith in my dream. Persistence in my effort. That's the secret." And as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, Timothy felt certain of one truth: he would never stop. Title: Master Your Mind, The Final Secret to an Unstoppable Life. Part 6. Based on Napoleon Hill's principles. Hook. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that every fear, every doubt, and every limitation that ever held you back was nothing more than an illusion your mind created. What if the only thing standing between you and your dream life was you, and the moment you truly understood that, your whole world could change? That's exactly what happened to Alex Monroe. The turning point: Alex had already learned to face fear, question beliefs, and use failure as fuel. But there was still one final mountain left to climb: the mastery of his own mind. And no matter how hard he worked, he noticed something strange. When things started going well, his old thoughts crept back in. "You don't deserve this. It's only luck. You're going to lose it all." He realized that the enemy was no longer outside him. It was living in his own head. One night, sitting alone in his small apartment, Alex opened Think and Grow Rich again. His eyes caught a line he had underlined months ago. "You have absolute control over only one thing, your thoughts." That night changed everything. The power within Alex began to study how thoughts shaped his results. He noticed a pattern. Every time he focused on worry, more problems appeared. But when he focused on gratitude and possibility, opportunities seemed to appear out of nowhere. He remembered what Napoleon Hill wrote: "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." So Alex made a decision. From that moment on, he would guard his mind like a fortress. Every morning, before touching his phone or checking his emails, he sat quietly for 10 minutes. He visualized his goals. He pictured himself confident, calm, and capable. He repeated powerful affirmations. "I am the master of my mind. I control my thoughts, and my thoughts create my reality. Every challenge is a chance to grow stronger." At first, it felt strange, forced, even fake. But within weeks, something began to shift. He walked taller. He spoke with conviction. People started to notice his energy. It wasn't magic. It was mental discipline. When the world tests you, but life always tests you when you decide to change. A few months later, Alex lost his biggest client. His rent was due. Fear came rushing back. The old voice whispered, "You see? You're not good enough. You'll never make it." For a moment, Alex almost believed it. But then he stopped and took a deep breath. He remembered what Hill taught about persistence, the habit of never quitting, even when everything falls apart. He said out loud, "I've trained my mind for this. I will not go back." He opened his journal and wrote 3 questions. 1. What is this situation trying to teach me? 2. How can I use it to grow? 3. What would my strongest self do right now? Then he got up and acted. He reached out to new clients, refined his skills, and doubled his effort. Within a month, he had not only recovered but landed 2 larger contracts. His confidence exploded. That's when he truly understood: success isn't about luck, it's about mastering your mind under pressure. The law of control. One evening, Alex met his old mentor, Mr. Dawson, who smiled and said, "Alex, now you finally get it. The secret isn't about controlling the world, it's about controlling your reaction to it." He continued, "Your thoughts are like the captain of a ship. If you steer them toward fear, the waves will destroy you. But if you steer them toward faith, even storms will carry you forward." Alex nodded. It all made sense now. He realized that his thoughts created his emotions shaped his actions, and his actions built his destiny. He began teaching others what he learned: how to reprogram their minds, how to face fear, and how to believe in themselves again. People who had once been broken started rebuilding their lives, becoming unstoppable. Months later, Alex was invited to speak at a local business event. He stood on stage, looking at hundreds of faces filled with doubt and worry. He told them, "I used to be afraid of everything, failing, being rejected, even succeeding. But the day I decided to master my thoughts, everything changed. You don't need perfect conditions to win. You only need control of your own mind. The crowd went silent. Then, applause filled the room. In that moment, Alex knew he had completed the transformation. He was no longer controlled by fear, failure, or opinions. He had become unstoppable, not because he was fearless, but because he had learned to think differently. Napoleon Hill's final truth. Napoleon Hill taught that your mind is your greatest asset. Everything begins as a thought, your dreams, your goals, even your fears. If you let negative thoughts dominate, you will live in limitation. But if you feed your mind with belief, persistence, and purpose, you will live in power. Alex's story reminds us all, fear fades when faced. Failure teaches when embraced. Thoughts create when directed. Your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. Master the inside, and the outside will follow. The final challenge for you. So now, it's your turn. Ask yourself, what thoughts are shaping my life right now? Am I feeding my fears or my faith? Am I reacting to life, or creating it? Remember, you are not a victim of your thoughts. You are their creator. Guard your mind. Direct it with purpose. Choose powerful thoughts every day. Because once you master your mind, there are no limits left. Call to action. Fire. If Alex's story inspired you to take control of your life and think like a winner, don't keep it to yourself. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe to the channel for more life-changing stories based on Napoleon Hill's timeless wisdom. Thumbs up like this video if you're ready to master your mind. Speech Alone. Comment below. What fear or thought are you ready to conquer today? Repeat button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their power begins in their mind.